So we saw in the previous video that for S/4HANA Fury risk analysis, SAP delivered initially 3 BC sets. So let's go to SAP, go to transaction SC PR20. What are those 3 BC sets? The 3 BC sets were S/4HANA all, S/4HANA underscore core, and S/4HANA underscore Fury. So one underscore Fury is for that delivers the rule sets for Fury apps only. S/4HANA core delivers the core rule set for S/4HANA system, which includes the OData services related to the Fury apps. And then for the new approach, right? These two are for the old one, the old approach where you needed these two BC sets to be activated. And for the new approach now, what is with the one which SAP supports, you need S/4HANA all, which includes the S/4HANA transaction codes as well as the OData services as well as the Fury apps. So it supports, it contains all of it. So let's take a look with these two, which we don't need anymore. But let's see what these two used to bring in. So S/4HANA Fury BC Set, if you look at after activating the BC Set, you will get this log. You will get the function IDs that this BC Set would bring into your GRC system. Okay. And if you see the Fury apps from this particular BC Set, the function IDs, they all end with underscore FAP. And the Fury apps are prefixed with and in the rectangle parenthesis with FAPP. Okay. And the connector ID it brings in is SAP underscore S4 F underscore LG. So this BC set only brings in the Fury apps related Fury apps into your GRC rule set. Okay, and then these are the risk IDs that all of these function IDs are put in. Okay. So S/4HANA Fury brings in function IDs and that end with underscore FAP, and then it also is part of the connector ID S4 F underscore LG. Okay. Now, like we saw earlier also, right, the action here in the function ID is, the Fury app, and the Fury app name that you have here is basically the semantic object separated by a hyphen, then followed by the semantic action of the in the target mapping of the Fury app. Okay. So S/4HANA underscore Fury, this BC set brings in the Fury apps, okay, into the GRC rule set. Now, similarly, if you look at S/4HANA core, then you see it would bring in that S/4HANA transaction codes, okay, and along with that, it would also bring in the OData services of the Fury apps, okay, with the IWSV entry, okay, line item. And then it also brings in the FAPP related entry for the Fury app. Okay, so this was what is considered or used in the old approach. Okay, now if you see the connector, it brings in as S4 C, which is S4 core underscore LG. Okay, this is another connector ID that it brings in for these function IDs, right? This function IDs look familiar because they are there in the normal ones also. These are the normal function IDs. The only difference with the normal rule set that you have in R3 and this one is that it brings in the Fury related components into with the rule set. Okay. Now these two were needed for the running the risk analysis with the old approach, but with the new approach, SAP which now supports, okay, going forward it is going to support the new approach that we're going to talk about now, and we spoke about it earlier also. For the new approach, all you need is this one BC set that need to be activated. Now this S/4HANA all, this will bring in the normal transaction codes that you have in S/4HANA. Along with that, it also brings in the Fury apps, okay, Fury app entries in the rule set. Now see, Fury apps are part of the normal business function, right? In S/4HANA Fury, you had the business function as AP01_FAP. Okay, so you don't need those business functions anymore, because with this particular BC set, SAP has included all the Fury apps, delivered Fury apps into the normal business function itself. So you will have the transaction codes. Obviously, if you scroll down, you'll also have the permissions, also the authorizations and all. But from an action standpoint, the function IDs contain now the transaction codes as well as the Fury apps. And if you scroll down a little bit towards the end, you will also see that it also includes, in some cases, I'll have to go to the end. The OData services. Okay. So if you see, the OData services are also included in the Fury, in this particular BC set. So along with the Fury app entries, which are prefixed with FAPP, the OData services are also included in the BC set. And the OData services are prefixed with SVC. Okay. And the connector ID that this BC set brings in is for A_LG. So what SAP recommends is you basically use the function IDs and the risk IDs that this particular BC set brings in. You need to disregard the data that is coming, the rule set that is coming from S/4HANA core and S/4HANA Fury. You need to disregard this. And if you have activated these two BC sets, we saw in earlier video what is the procedure to adjust to the new approach, right? How can we, remove the _FAP function IDs from the risk IDs and then adjust the Fury apps into the normal business function, right? So we have seen that procedure. We spoke about that procedure. And then we also saw a OSS node that would that gives the instructions to delete the entries coming from this connector ID, right? We have seen that. So the first step that you do, right, after the GRC system is given to you and you're going to implement Fury, whether it's in an embedded environment or it's in a, whether it's in a central hub environment, you need now, for the new approach, you only need the S/4HANA all BC set. Okay, so the OSS node that we are talking about, we spoke about, there's an OSS node that tells you how to delete entries coming from these two BC sets, the S/4HANA core and S/4HANA Fury. So this is the first step that you do, activate that. And once you have activated the BC set, you also need to go and generate the rule set in SPRO. So in SPRO, what you also need to do is, we are not going to go through the entire configuration, right? We need to define or configure the Fury system um, as a subsequent connected to the S/4HANA system. And along with that, we also need to set up two parameters, right? Which is 1022 for both the S/4HANA as well as the Fury connectors. And then you also need to set up 1046 parameter for both S/4HANA connector as well as the Fury system connector. Okay, so you need to do this. This becomes part of your configuration. Now, once the Fury GRC rule set is activated, the BC set is activated. Now let us go and take a look at how these things look like, right? So if you go to log into NWBC, and you go to setup and take a look at function. Now if you scroll down a little bit, if you see you have function IDs which end with FAP, right? These are the function IDs that have come in with the S/4HANA _ Fury BC set. Okay. Now, if you look at, let's say AP01 function ID, right? Or AR01 for that matter. If you see this function ID, and if you scroll down, this is for S/4ALG, right? But this is for HANA core, right? So it is coming from these entries, the service OData service entries, they're coming from S/4HANA core. See, if you see the entries with IWSV, with the new approach, you don't need to have these entries, okay? So all you need is the entries that come from S4A _ LG connector. That is S4HANA all BC set. So because in this system, all the three BC sets were activated, you can see the entries from all those BC sets. Okay. Now if you look at this _FAP function ID, you will only find the Fury apps. Okay, you don't find the transaction codes, you don't find the OData service. Now, similarly, if you go and take a look at risk IDs, right, in access risk, and take a look at one of the risk IDs, let's say F001. Okay, let's take this. Okay, so it's not there anymore, because otherwise in old mechanism you would have found GL01 _ FAP and GL02 _ FAP also in this. Okay, which in this case it's not there, but which is good. So that is the new approach. Okay, so this is what these three BC sets do for you. Okay, now if you want to include a BC set, let's say our Fury app or OData Fury, OData service related to a Fury app into an existing, it's a function risk, right? Okay, let's go to function. Oh, this already open somewhere. No, it's not. I think some reason it's not closed, so I will log off and come back in again and continue. Okay. So functions, right? So if there are, apps that are not part of the rule set, right? And if you want to make them part of the rule set, whether it's your custom app that you have developed or it's an SAP delivered app itself, and if they are not part of the rule set, the delivered rule sets, then you could include them into the rule set. So let's say I go to so I have made note of two rule sets here, two four Fury apps. Um, let's say we want to maintain this uh, data service of Fury app into our existing rule set. Okay. So what you would do is you'll pick the, because that's MM, let's pick one MM related, let's take this. Let's say not MM, right? It's material purchasing. Okay. So let's say, you okay, let's purchase order, right? Let's take PR02. So I want to include this PO purchase maintenance into, and if it's not already part of this particular business function, okay? So let's see, how do we add that? So it's not there, okay? So if you want to add an OData service, okay, into a business function for risk analysis purposes, you will open the business function and click on add, and pick the system. Let's say I take S4ALG, and because it's an OData service, you prefix it with SVC and give the OData service name. Okay, and hit the enter key. If the auth sync job has run and everything is good, you would see the description here. Okay. And if you go to permission, and somewhere at the bottom in the end, you should have all the objects, authorizations that are coming from because of SU24 tie-ups in this for HANA system. Okay. Now you can, depending on your requirement, you can go and activate some of these objects. Okay. So okay. So let's say I want to activate this. Now, whenever you want to make a change, whenever you change something in the rule set, you have to generate the rule set also. Okay, so click on save. Okay, now let's say we added the Fury, OData service related to the particular app, right? That's what we did in SVC. Yeah. Now what if you want to add the FIORI app related information also. So for that, you would need the semantic object and semantic action of this particular app. So how do you find that out? Okay, so we take this app, right? And then let's say because it's a Fury delivered app, right? SAP delivered app, what you could do is you can go to the Fury, let's do this. You can go to Fury apps library. And search for the Fury app based on whatever information you have. If you have the OData service name, that's good. And then in the target mapping, pick up the actions, okay, of the OData service. So I would say, let's say, because this is for managing purchase order, right? Let's take this. So what you could do is, again, okay, you need to run the sync job on the Fury system. Okay, in this case, we would not have, we have not done that. So I would just show you what the entry, how the entry needs to be entered. So what you do is, you click on add in the function in which you want to add the Fury app, and then you take the system connector. And for the Fury app, what you do, you prefix it with FAPP. And then you need the semantic object, okay, followed by a hyphen. And then you also need the semantic action. Okay, now okay, keep in mind, if I hit the enter key, nothing may show up, but that is because we have not run the authorization sync job in the Fury connector, Fury system. Okay, but this is the entry that you would do. But this will not, because there are no entry, there are no objects. It won't bring in any data in the permission tab. But to add a Fury app, you need to do this. You need to prefix it with FAPP in square brackets, and then follow it with the semantic object, separated by a hyphen, and the semantic action of the Fury app. Okay, so this is how you add a Fury app or a OData service related to the Fury app into a function. Okay, so let's take an example. Okay, so what we'll do now, we'll create a function, two functions, or one function, two functions. We'll put this Fury app into OData service into one, and we'll put on this one into another one. Okay, and create a role and then run the risk analysis report on the risk ID. Okay, so let's go to here. So let's say okay, so let's create one. So let's say GRC SP fun ID 1. It doesn't take. So it's not taking what we want. So let's say let's say FID1, okay. And let's this one business process. It doesn't really matter, right? So let's take something, okay, and single system. Now to add the OData service, what you need to do now is, so FID1, this is, let's say maintain POs. Okay, click on add, and let's take the connector, the system, let's say S4 ALG. Because it's a OData service, we are going to take, let's put this one, right? And hit the enter key. Okay, so you enter it with, keep in mind the OData services need to be prefixed with SVC. And go to permissions, and let's activate couple of objects, okay, couple of permissions. Okay, so let's take this. So best BAC, let's activate this. Let's activate this. Okay, we don't take 03 or whatever. And then we take wherever we have 01 and 02. So let's take this. Okay. So you add the OData service, and then whatever you have mapped in SU24 in the S4 HANA system, those entries will come in the permissions. You can activate, depending on your requirement, your business scenario criticality, you activate, depending on your concerns, you activate the objects, the authorizations, okay, that you need to have in your risk analysis to go after. Okay, so we created ZSP FID1. Okay, so now let's go and create another one. Let's say ZSP FID2. And let's say this one, let's say it's a sales process. Okay, click on add and select your system. Now this time we want to include, let's say this one, this particular app. So what you need to do is prefix the OData service with SVC. Okay. And hit the enter key. And like I said, if everything is good, you will get the description, and then in the permissions, you will find the objects also. So again, let us go and activate a couple of authorizations here. Okay. And save it. Okay. So we didn't give the description. So let's say customer invoices. Okay. All right. So we created two function IDs. Now let us go and create a risk ID. Okay. All right. So let's go to access risk. Let's go create one risk ID. Say ZSP risk ID 1. Okay. Okay, so let's say business process, we take it doesn't really matter. So let's say ZSP FID 1 versus ZSP FID 2. Okay. Now click on add to include those two conflicting function IDs here. So it says ZSP FID 1 and add another one, ZSP FID 2. Okay, in the rule set, click on add and let's select global. Okay. Now we're not going to go with mitigation controls or anything. So we'll have to do this again because it's submit. I don't want to submit and use a workflow for this. Because I don't know if it is set up or not. So let's redo this again. Okay, so I'm going to pause it. So if you want to do this, so remove. So it's not part of your setup. Okay, so I'm just going to go and say no to those workflow related okay, let's try again. Let's go and create. This one. Let's take, I don't know what we took earlier, but let's take this. We took this. I'm going to make a copy of this. Add the functions ESP1 and then add it again with 2. And the rule set, go and add. It is still submit. Why? Oh yeah, here we have forgot to do this. Let's see. Okay, now let's go and create a risk ID now. Okay. So ZSP risk 1. Let's take let's take something else. Right? So give a description for the conflict. Let's say the risk is high. Okay. And let's take this and copy here. Okay. Click on add. The first function ID, enter the first function ID here. Then you add to, as if enter the second function ID, which is going to conflict with the first one. Click on rule sets, click on add, and let's say I go and assign this to global. Okay, so I've created ZSP risk and click on save. So the risk ID is created. Okay, so if you go to and see if the risk is there, so you have it here with these two function IDs. Okay, now because you have created a new risk, no function IDs and new risk, we also need to generate the rule set, okay, for the risk, for whatever changes you have made. Now, before we do that, okay, let us go and see let us create a role with these two conflicting audit. Okay, so let's say I create a role called ZSP risk 1. Okay. Now this is the mechanism. What we're going to see now is how do we create a Fury role in the backend system, in the S4HANA system. Okay. In Fury security, keep in mind, okay, you need two roles. One role on the front-end Fury system to give access to the apps, and another role, the second role, in the S4HANA system to consume the data from the S4HANA system by the Fury apps. Okay, so what we are looking at now is the role creation method, procedure for creating the backend role. So what you do is you click on this small arrow mark and then click on authorization default. Okay, this is the procedure to create the Fury roles in the backend system. Okay, then on the authorization default, select TADIR, and then in the object type, you select IWSV SAP Gateway Business Suite Enablement option. And then you need to search, okay, for the OData services. Okay, preferably you do that with asterisks in the beginning and asterisks in the end, so that you get the exact OData service. So this one is not there. No, so we have to do it in the back-end system, right? We are doing it in the front-end system. So you don't, this is wrong. So let's go and delete this role. So we are in a GRC system. You have to create that role in the backend system. So we have logged into the S4HANA system. Okay, so go to PFCG and create a role that we are talking about, right? So create a role with these two conflicting the two conflicting apps, right, that we defined in the function IDs. Okay, another thing, right? So you can combine, like you saw in the standard delivered function IDs, right? You can combine the Fury apps with the regular transaction codes also. Okay, in our example, we didn't do it, but you can do that. Okay. Okay, so let's go and save. And now we go to the menu tab, and in the transaction, not the transaction, you click on the small arrow mark and select authorization default. And in the authorization default, select the option TADIR service. And in the object type, select IWSV, SAP Gateway Business Suite Enablement. Okay, so let's go and select the two data services. And like I said earlier, you do the selection by putting asterisks in the beginning and asterisks in the end so that you get the exact OData service name. Okay, enter. I didn't select it properly. Okay, so when you do that, you will get this 001, 0001 in the end. And this is the entry you get. Okay, similarly, you can go and select, enter the other OData service, right? This one. Then search for the OData service for that particular app. Hit the enter key. Say copy. Then you can go and now maintain the authorizations as you do in a normal ECC or S/4HANA system. Okay, so this will bring in the authorization objects and the org values, everything. This. Okay, so let's go and save full. Save it. Maintain the authorizations. Execute. Generate the role. Now, there are two things that we did here, right? One, we created two function IDs, custom function IDs, and a risk ID, okay, which means we changed the rule set, GRC rule set. Now we also created a new role, okay? And if you want to assign this to a user ID, you can do that also. Let's do that also. Okay. So Z, let's say test SP risk 1. Okay, let's create. I'm not going to log in anyway, so let's generate the password. And ZSP risk 1. That's the rule. Okay. Save it. Now we created a role in the S/4HANA system, and then we created a user ID also, right? So along with in the GRC system now, so along with generating the risk ID and the rule set, we also now have to we have to run the repository sync job also now, so that we get that role information and the user ID information into the GRC access control system. So let's go to SPRO and go to reference IMG, and then first let's do let's generate the risk. Okay. Execute generate SOD rules, and let's say this was ZSP risk 1. Okay, I'm just going to generate only our risk ID. Okay, let's do that. So rule successfully generated. Now let us go and run, do this repository sync. Okay, we don't need to do authorization sync because we did not do any SU24 changes. So let's go and run, but because we created a new role and a new user ID, let's run the repository sync for our connector. Okay. I'm going to run this in full sync mode. Okay. And I'm going to pause the video till this job gets finished. Okay. All right. So the job has completed, right? Now let's see if this works. So go to your GRC NWBC. Let's close this. Okay. And go to reports and analytics. Okay, go to access management. And let's click on select and run the report on a role level. Let's pick up our connector. Okay. And let's say ZSP risk 1. Okay. And the rule set is global. And let's take all. Nothing showed up. Let's take